Hello, Canada, and welcome to another episode of the Maple Pill. As always, I'm your host, Matt McKeever. Episode 15. So far, so good. We haven't been banned off of social media after 15 episodes, so I'm glad to hear that. And essentially, we've got a lot more of the same today. So we're going to start off tonight's broadcast with a section just updating on what's going on with the trucker protest as far as the Freedom Convoy is concerned. Definitely seems like there's a lot more people showing up than what originally the Ottawa police said they were preparing for. Remember, yesterday we covered a story where they said they expected 1,000 to 2,000 people. Well, it looks like that number is definitely going to get blown out. We'll see exactly what the final amount is come tomorrow. But yeah, I've got a bunch to fill you guys in on in regards to the trucker convoy. Then we'll move on to our normal pills of the day. So the blue pill, red pill, black pill, clown pill, and then finally the white pill. But definitely the main focus tonight, again, is going to be on the trucker convoy. And before even jumping into any updates, I just want to kind of highlight something or get something off of my chest. At this point in time, I can't help but feel that essentially there's two types of people in the world. There's those that understand history, and there's those that trust the government and trust the media blindly. I don't see how there can be any other categories. But you guys let me know in the comments section. And as always, all the stories I'm going to be sharing with you tonight, there's links in the video description down below. Don't let this show be the end of your information gathering journey. Let this really just be the springboard and the jumping off point so that you can do your own due diligence and come to your own conclusions. Because despite what the corporate press and politicians want, you actually are capable of making your own informed decisions. It's just a matter of actually finding the information, which is getting tougher by the day, it seems like. But anyways, enough of my rambling. Let's jump into some of the updates. So the first update, not sure if you guys saw, but Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, he further clarified why he's isolating and exactly what's going on. The fact that they felt like they needed to do a follow-up story to this tells me everything, that they realized that at least their initial narrative of just saying that he tested negative for COVID, but was exposed to someone and he was going to self-isolate for 5 days. I feel like they realized that that probably wasn't going to be a satisfying answer enough. So they've added or clarified a little bit more the following day. But again, it doesn't really make me think any differently of them. So essentially, going from the story here, in an interview with the Canadian press, he says he feels fine and has no symptoms. He says he took another test this morning and it was negative, as was the previous rapid test. So now he's got 2 negative rapid tests. It turns out that one of his children did test positive for COVID, or at least that's what we're being told. But I don't know. It's just interesting to me that they felt like they needed to come out and clarify this further. But enough talking about Trudeau. Let's keep rolling here. So just want to highlight, I believe this was originally a cartoon from the Washington Post, if I'm not mistaken. And I think Tim Pool summarizes things perfectly here. They think these people think that when the working class resists the elites, it's fascism. And so literally all the convoys of trucks have fascism written on it. I don't know. I'm tired at this point in time that the moment someone is enemy of the corporate press or the politicians, that they're immediately labeled as racist, white nationalists, as a fringe minority, as well as often being called fascist. It's just not the case. And in fact, I think when you really look at who's for freedom, who's for individual bodily autonomy and making your own medical decisions, and who believes you should just do whatever you're told to do, it's very obvious where those lines are drawn. And it's not the truckers that are the issue right now in Canada. I can tell you that with real certainty. But I did want to highlight this article from antihate.ca. So essentially, we've covered a bunch of different stories throughout the last couple of days on the trucker convoy. And a regular thing you'll hear is that it's far-right extremists, that it's a fringe minority, and that they're all racist. Well, up until this article, literally there was almost no documentation or real proof or even attempt to really prove that. It just seems like the moment one person says it, everyone else feels comfortable re-saying it. Now, Anti-Hate has given some interviews where they were pushing this narrative, and I want you guys to go to this article. It's definitely the most thorough article attacking some of the founders of the convoy, but again, it's primarily focused on them being adjacent to people whose opinions aren't appropriate for polite company. And again, it doesn't seem like, from what I read in this article, at least, it doesn't seem like any of these individuals have really acted with violence in the past. It doesn't seem like, other than potentially being associated with some characters that, again, I don't know, probably I don't need to be associated with. That's about it. I didn't find a smoking gun in here, but again, I'd love you guys to go and actually read this article and let me know, do you think that I'm making too little of this? And again, that's not to say that we want to support or promote people that have, views that we may find distasteful, but at the same time, I do think individuals have the right to have their own views on things, even if we think that they're wrong. But at this point in time, what I really want to highlight here is that this trucker, this freedom convoy, this is so much bigger than a trucker vaccine mandate. It's so much bigger than the founders. It's so much bigger than any individual that participates in it. In my opinion, this is really just a mass grassroots movement. Now, again, a handful of people were the lightning rod that kind of brought this together. But this is really just, I believe that a lot of Canadians are fed up. A lot of Canadians are frustrated. A lot of Canadians are tired of seeing narratives constantly evolve without those, massaging the narratives, at least owning up to how the narrative's changing, right? Originally, remember way back when, you might need your time machine at this point in time, but 2 years ago, we were told 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And since then, we've created all these great tools to fight the pandemic, right? We've got medications now. We understand the virus a lot more. We've got vaccinations, and we had 2 years to improve our health infrastructure. And yet somehow we find ourselves under just as much lockdown as we originally did at the start of the pandemic. How does this compute? How does this make sense for anyone? And the fact that, our politicians, that our politicians won't just come out and explain things to us in an open and honest and transparent manner. And the fact that the corporate press isn't the check or balance that we need in order to actually hold their feet to the fire, to actually get some real results or some real answers on why it is the case. Again, it's unfortunate to me to see the mainstream press just constantly focusing on saying, regurgitating essentially Trudeau's talking points at this point in time. But I'll move on here. Again, I do encourage you guys to read the anti-hate article here. Now, again, like they talk about things like one guy raising, and this guy isn't directly associated with the convoy, but like one guy raising a military militia here in Canada. And I don't know, the way they talk about all this here makes it sound like Canada's just filled with racists. I don't know, maybe you guys have a different experiences in Canada than I have, but over my last 35 years, I haven't been exposed to like any of this stuff. And in fact, the most extreme examples they highlight in here, I'd never even heard of those guys until reading this article. So again, maybe I'm just blissfully ignorant of all these things, but yeah, you do your own research and you come to your own conclusions on that. But again, like I said, that's literally the worst thing. And I didn't see a smoking gun there. So just wanted to update everyone on the GoFundMe. So the Freedom Convoy 2022 is now almost at 7.5 million, which is, I don't know, truly astounding. And again, it's hard for me to not believe that this is a grassroots movement when we see almost 95,000 different donors or donations that have made up this sum of 7.5 million. And again, we're just going to try and hit through a lot of these because I don't want the entire episode to be focused on the trucker convoy. But as always, I'd love to hear what's your thoughts, your opinions on everything that's going on. If you guys are in Ottawa, if you're participating in the Freedom Convoy, let me know. What's the vibes like, right? What's going on? What are you personally experiencing? Because it's so hard to tell fact from fiction in this day and age, particularly when the corporate press just seems to be mute on the entire thing. In fact, this isn't one of the articles that I was going to highlight, but the New York Times, up until like a couple hours ago, had literally zero coverage on what's going on in Canada. That personally seems very bizarre to me. But wanted to highlight this from the Toronto Star. So Freedom Rally Convoy has withdrawn $1 million from once frozen viral fundraiser GoFundMe. So it is great to see them gain access to some of this money. I hope this can help facilitate and allow the protest to go even smoother than it's already been going up until this point in time. The narrative that it was frozen, I think, is a little bit misleading because the way it was originally presented in the press was, this was a validation that this was a inappropriate fundraiser, or that somehow, it was GoFundMe essentially identifying that, something's amiss here. And really, it was just about, we want to see a formal plan in place. And while I understand that federal politicians aren't used to having to actually explain how they got to spend their money or how they're going to spend their money, for a lot of us, we do need to do that. And again, from what I've heard from some insiders, it seems like they've got a very reasonable process in place in order to make sure that those that receive funds are actually participating in the convoy, and so on and so forth. So again, great to see them gain access to this, but I am still frustrated by the constant focus on it being frozen. because I just think that that's misleading to the general public, who's likely just going to be reading the headlines. But we'll keep rolling here. And another one that constantly seems to come up is the heavy police presence, or police preparing, or CSIS, which is the I forget what it stands for off the top here, but essentially the Canadian Intelligence Service. Again, understanding that this is quite normal in just about any large protest. So just because police are involved or preparing for things, it's not the smoking gun that I feel like a lot of these headlines are trying to make it out to be. Although, as we've covered in previous videos, I am personally really concerned that it seems like the Ottawa police, up until this moment in time, either they were lying to the corporate press or they literally weren't taking it seriously. Because as we covered in yesterday's article, they literally said they expected 1,000 to 2,000 people. Well, I've been looking at just some live stream footage, and I'll share with you guys in a second where you can actually go and watch some live stream footage of what's going on. But I feel like I can see hundreds of people just on these individual live streams, which are just covering one little corner or one random bridge and doesn't really encompass the entire movement. So I really do hope that the city of Ottawa is far more prepared than what they appear to be leading on to the general public, because if not, this will result in chaos and it's not going to be good for anyone. So again, I really do hope they're taking it more seriously than what they've been kind of making it seem like. And wanted to highlight this from Reuters here. So beleaguered Trudeau rival embraces truck protest despite concerns of violence. And so this is about Aaron O'Toole and his flip-flopping. So we'll just get right to the source of it. And we can hear him flip-flop today. And or I guess this actually came out last night, but I think it was after the fact when I originally put together my research for the video. But he's just been so disingenuous. It's very clear that he's just trying to, walk a tightrope of offending no one. And when you try to offend no one, you're not really standing for anything, in my opinion.
Convoy itself is becoming a symbol of the fatigue and the division we're seeing in this country. So tomorrow I will be meeting with truckers to hear their concerns, to talk about the proposals I brought 3 weeks ago to try and make sure we can keep grocery store shelves full.
And now let's highlight, what were those proposals again? He wasn't actually against vaccine mandates. He literally just wanted to create more education and maybe delay the vaccine mandates. I don't think he actually understands what this protest is about and why so many grassroots Canadians, why so many average Canadians are actually feeling like their government's not listening to them. Because he's the perfect embodiment, other than Trudeau. Trudeau's probably the best perfect embodiment of a politician not giving a shit about their citizens. But Aaron O'Toole is a very close second, in my opinion. And then moving on, what I want to highlight here is from the CBC. So health minister says vaccines are not the enemy as protests convoy descent on Ottawa. Now, this has been something that the convoy has been pretty transparent with. They've released some press statements saying that they're not anti-vaccine, they're anti-mandate. And honestly, I don't even think we need to have the discussion about the vaccines because it really comes down to mandates. Do you believe you've got the ability to make your own bodily choices over what goes into your body? Should you be able to make informed decisions on the medical procedures that you're going to undertake? Or do you believe that that's the state's prerogative? And if you believe it's the state's prerogative, understand that that essentially is stating that they own your body. And the moment we find ourselves on that slippery slope, it's not too much further into complete tyranny, in my opinion. But as the article states here, Health Minister Jean-Yves Duclos defended his government's vaccination push Friday as a convoy of protesters opposed to vaccine mandates prepares to descend on Ottawa this weekend. The enemy is not vaccination. The enemy is COVID-19. And the best tool to fight this enemy is to be vaccinated, he said during a public health briefing Friday morning. We understand now there is frustration around COVID-19, but we also know that the only way to exit COVID-19 is to get vaccinated. So we've already got 90% apparently of Canadians that are vaccinated. They say 90% of truckers are vaccinated. That should be more than enough to create, what we originally were told at the start of the pandemic of herd immunity. I believe you can go back and fact check me on this, but a lot of politicians and health ministers and health advisors were throwing around like 75%, 80% is more than enough, particularly once you also factor in natural immunity, which continuously seems to just be overlooked in these discussions. But the big thing I want to highlight here is, what does exiting COVID-19 even look like, right? I believe at this point in time, we all understand that the vaccine is not a perfect vaccine. It's what they call a leaky vaccine. which means that you can still get it and you can still transmit the virus. So at this point in time, what does an exit of COVID-19 actually mean, Mr. Health Minister? Because I just, without definitive statements and goalposts, we're just going to find ourselves on this treadmill of constantly hoping for a little bit more safety by giving up all our freedoms. I'm done with it. And I think that a lot of those that are showing up to the protesters, a lot of those donating to the protesters, they're in the same boat. They may be vaccinated, they may not be vaccinated. They may believe in crazy conspiracy theorists. They may be, the most science-oriented individual in the world. But I think at this point in time, everyone's just wondering, can you actually even explain to us what exiting COVID-19 mandates looks like? Because I don't think they can. And again, circling back to the fact that we haven't improved our health infrastructure over the last 2 years shows that they weren't that concerned about your health or making sure that we could handle future pandemics. It was all about just finding a silver bullet. I think personally, this is my opinion now, I personally think that they were just hoping they could put all their eggs in the vaccine basket and that somehow would miraculously save us all. And at this point in time, again, we've got a leaky vaccine. What the hell does even exiting COVID-19 look like when we hear many other governments, and even now the Ontario health minister is saying it's going to be endemic. We're going to have to learn to live with it. The same way, countries like Sweden decided almost day one that they were going to live with COVID-19. Another article from the CBC here. So large number of donations to support Convoy came from aliases, unnamed donors. And yeah, okay. Like, one, I think this is quite common on almost any GoFundMe. Some people just don't want to have their names out there published on the internet in general. But even more specifically, understand that we live in a very divisive time, right? It doesn't seem that far-fetched that eventually we could see that anyone that donated to this ending up on a government list or somehow, being treated differently or punished for their choices. It doesn't seem far-fetched from my perspective, particularly when we think back to, we covered that Oshawa school board that essentially released an entire list, emailed it out, of all their staff members that weren't vaccinated. Again, it's very easy for data to be compromised. It's very easy for it to find its way out into the wild. And so I don't think there's anything nefarious about this, that a large number of donations chose to be aliases or not reveal their identities. So at least a third of the donations to the GoFundMe campaign set up to support the convoy of trucks headed to Ottawa to protest vaccine mandates came from anonymous sources or were attributed to fake names, according to an analyst or an analysis by CBC News. And again, they do highlight, like, right at the very bottom but they use the frame conspiracy theorists, but it talks about how some people are concerned that they eventually could be punished for supporting this. It's not that crazy, right? Like, we've seen scandals in the past where the IRS went after people that directly donated or supported financially the Tea Party way back when. Does it seem that crazy that the Canadian government, that the CRA may decide to do something similarly? No. At least I don't even need to get my tinfoil hat out in order to believe that. But let's keep rolling here. This is from Blacklock's reporter. And again, I want to encourage you guys, if you're tempted to support one of the Canadian news agencies out there, I think Blacklock's is one of the better ones out there for us that actually care about facts and aren't completely caught up in feelings. So, say media vilified protesters. MPs yesterday accused media of vilifying protesters attending a Freedom Convoy truckers rally on Parliament Hill. Reporters at a press briefing described various demonstrators as bigots. So, and right there, right? Like, when reporters are describing them as bigots, I think we can understand the bias that's occurring. This is a direct quote here. The establishment media have been looking for controversies with some of these truckers, said Conservative MP Brad Vees, Mission Matsky, BC. They're trying to find all the bad things that someone might have said on social media. There's a lot of people who are coming to Ottawa who don't know what else to do because their lives have been impacted just as much as mine and yours the last 2 years, MP Vees told reporters. They're trying to find a constructive way to let people know, hey, I'm not okay with what's happening. I'm not okay with everything that the government is doing. And I 100% agree with this. We've talked about since day one when we first covered the trucker convoy. This isn't just about trucker and vaccine mandates. This is about just creating common knowledge as game theory would dictate. A lot of people, they're not willing to stand up until they know that there's others that think like them. One of the primary reasons that I created the Maple Pill show was in the hopes of trying to help generate common knowledge. Hey guys, just so you know, I'm not okay with what's going on in Canada right now. And it's okay if you're not okay with it either. In fact, you've got an ally and a friend in me. And I believe a lot of the viewers of this show as well. And that can be really empowering for a lot of individuals that maybe otherwise feel trapped or cornered based upon the narrative they're seeing, right? The moment that you even question what's going on, you're immediately labeled an anti-vaxxer, you're immediately labeled a racist, you're immediately labeled a fringe minority. Continuing on from the article, you know what, Sid V's? If they want to drive across the country, I think that's actually a really healthy way to demonstrate what you feel about something, and that should be encouraged. Agree with that. Parliament Hill Police said they expected as many as 10,000 demonstrators at weekend-long rallies in Ottawa. The number of demonstrators is not expected to exceed 10,000. The Parliamentary Protective Services said in a security notice precautions were routine, it said. So one, this is good. This is a step in the right direction because, as I mentioned, the Ottawa Police Services yesterday said they expected 1,000 to 2,000, which honestly, like, I don't know. 1,000 to 2,000 isn't, it both is a big protest still, but like certainly based upon the grassroots movement, based upon the donations, based upon literally just the number of vehicles driving to Ottawa, you know, it seems like it'd be very easy for us to exceed that 2,000 number. So I am glad to hear that at least the Parliament Hill Police, they're taking it a little bit more serious and they're preparing for 10,000 people. Now, 10,000 people is a lot of people. I've heard people throw around 50,000. I've heard people throw around as high as, I believe, 1.4 million. Now, 1.4 million personally seems like a wild stretch in a country that's got about a population of 38 million last time I checked. And I think on a previous show, I said 33 million because honestly, it just been a while since I looked at the number. But I looked it up this morning just to make sure I was a bit more accurate with my words. So again, yeah, I believe that we'll see at least 10,000 people in Ottawa. But again, time will tell. And regardless of how many people show up, it's so refreshing and it's so exciting to see some Canadians standing up and speaking out about what's going on. And again, understand that this is probably the tip of the iceberg. For every person that's able to take time off work or doesn't have a job or has the resources to travel to Ottawa, which isn't really in the center of the country by any stretch of the imagination during winter, when it's also, you know, it's not like you can just camp out and save money on an Airbnb or a hotel room. It takes a real commitment for individuals to go to Ottawa this time of the year and protest these sort of mandates and what's going on in Canada. And I just want to say I really respect every individual that's fighting for your fellow citizens' freedoms and rights here in Canada. And again, I really do appreciate it. And then just want to highlight a couple people have came out, you know, speaking support again for the truckers. So comedian Russell Brand voices support for Canadian truckers. And if you guys haven't checked in on Russell Brand in a while, he's actually got a fantastic podcast. He's very insightful and thoughtful when he's trying to explore subject matters. I think the 15-minute clip that they include in this article is really great. So again, links in the video description down below. I encourage you to go listen to the entire clip. Then Toronto Sun had Don Cherry 100% behind Convoy truckers. He calls great Canadians. So thankfully he didn't use the word you people, or I'm sure that would have caused a whole nother controversy. But I don't know if it really matters that Don Cherry is supporting it. And it seems kind of interesting to me that we would spend an entire article talking about Don Cherry's opinion at this point in time. I don't watch hockey, and I know that probably makes me almost not Canadian at this point in time. But I'm pretty sure Don Cherry is not even like a broadcaster anymore, right? He's retired, if I'm not mistaken. But what is interesting is, and this is from Zero Hedge, truckers across planet unite in convoys against medical tyranny. So in this article, it kind of states it appears there's already a movement growing in Australia. It appears there's also a movement growing in Italy, and there's also one in Brazil. And I guess the first question that comes to mind here for me is like, well, if everyone that's supporting the truckers in Canada is essentially a fringe minority and they're racist, right, according to the mainstream press, or they're far-right extremists, does that mean that Australia, Italy, and Brazil also are? Because why would they decide to speak out, right? And why would we see so many Americans also doing it as well? And why would you see so many people of color at the protests and supporting the truckers? It's just food for thought there. Continuing on, post-millennial, trucker convoy is the freedom protest Canada needs. I 100% agree with the sentiment. They've done a really thorough and extended article here. Link in the video description down below. I encourage you guys to go read it. This article from True North, the legacy media desperately wants the trucker convoy to be Canada's January 6th. I would love to give the corporate press media the benefit of the doubt at this point in time, but I literally think that they're salivating for it. I think that they're only going to focus on, at the protest, can they find someone with a Confederate flag? Can they find someone that says a bad word? Can they find someone that, 5 years ago on Twitter tweeted something that was inappropriate? And the world I live in, having a flag isn't such a threat, isn't such an evil thing that it completely negates an entire protest and grassroots movement. And moving on here, this is from canoe.com, and I think it was courtesy of Sun Media as well. But which poll on support for trucker vaccine mandates do you believe? And I think it's a good question. We covered a study that appeared to say that only 36% or just over a third of Canadians were absolutely for trucker mandates 100% and thought that unvaccinated truckers shouldn't be allowed to travel whatsoever. And then there's been lots of other studies coming out where, they're trying to get like CTV News did it, and they keep getting ratioed. It's very obvious what they want to have happen. And yet it continuously seems like 75% people say they support the truckers, about 25% don't. Some say like 30, 40, but again, it's so hard to understand who truly has no bias in trying to do these surveys at this point in time. And obviously, when the mainstream media does it, they're not trying to adjust for any factors. Where the study I did share with you yesterday actually does adjust for those factors. And I think at a margin rate, the classic margin rate of, plus or minus 2%, 19 times out of 20. But moving on, let's actually get into our first blue pill story of the day. And this one is essentially an article from The Economist, and this is from Abacus Data. And so I just want to highlight for you guys, the narrative's evolving on the supply chain shortages and inflation. It's not supply chain shortages, it's the shortage economy in Canada and what it means for leaders. So again, here I was thinking that we had supply chain issues, but we've just entered a different type of economy, the shortage economy. And again, this is a very long, thorough article. I encourage you guys to read all of it, but just want to highlight some of the summaries here. So the implications of this research are pretty clear. Obviously, we will need to start learning to do more with less. So get ready for some austerity. But we need also to recognize that employees and workers are empowered, even if they don't know it yet, and are coming to work with a different frame of mind. Many are tired, burned out, and looking for real meaning in their work. The customer experience has also changed. Labor and product shortages mean wait times are longer and full of friction than many have come to expect. The rapid shift to e-commerce has raised the bar to a standard that many brick and mortar retailers and service providers are having a challenge matching. And we are moving more sharply into politics of inflation, where public concerns focusing on the cost of living and the ability of political leaders to deliver relief are juxtaposed with budget deficits and fears of stoking inflation even more. So, customer service, that's so 2019, having things on the shelf, totally 2019. It's the shortage economy, stupid. So get ready for it. And that's that. And then if you guys have been following along, if you've been thinking that the Omnicron variant just isn't scary enough to do it for you anymore, to get you scared or panicked, don't worry. There is a new subvariant. So the Omnicron subvariant BA.2 being watched very closely in Canada, says TAM. And this is from CTV News. And again, link in the video description down below. Canada's top doctor says the Public Health Agency of Canada has detected more than 100 cases of a new Omnicron subvariant known as BA.2, doubling the number of infections from the virus lineage that were reported earlier this week. So honestly, I hadn't really heard too much about this. We're going to get a little bit deeper into what this subvariant really is. This is from NBC News. So as coronavirus case numbers in the U.S. show early signs of tapering, scientists are keeping a watchful eye on a newly identified version of the Omicron variant, nicknamed Stealth Omicron, that is driving new outbreaks in parts of Europe. The culprit is a subvariant of the Omicron variant, which means it's closely related to Omicron, but has some different mutations. Known officially as BA.2, the subtype has small variations that set it apart from the original Omicron strain, but not enough for it to be considered an entirely new lineage. So what Why is it known as the stealth Omicron? The nickname comes from a shortcut that helped researchers quickly identify Omicron in PCR tests. Because of a quirk in Omicron's genetic sequence, PCR test results look different from typical positive tests, essentially proving researchers with an easy way to spot the variant without sequencing the samples. With Omicron now accounting for more than 99% of new reported COVID-19 cases in the U.S., the distinction isn't a huge issue, Wolf said, and it doesn't affect how infections are dealt with in clinical settings. So they also go on to say it's too soon to know for sure, but there are concerns that the specific mutations identified with BA2 subtype could make it more contagious or better able to evade vaccines, two factors that had already enabled the Omicron variant to spread so pervasively around the globe. So again, we've got leaky vaccines, barring a miracle new vaccine that's a perfect vaccine, like a lot of the vaccines we remember as kids having to take. This is it. This is going to be endemic. The good news is that usually as a virus becomes more easily spread, usually it also dials back how dangerous it is. And there's better words to explain that, but it's not coming to my mind right now. But again, do your own research on it. Is it more contagious? Preliminary research in Denmark, where cases involving BA2 are rising, suggests that the subvariant may be more contagious than the original Omicron strain, which was already the most transmissible known variant to date. So definitely transmission's likely going to continue up, and it's here to stay, guys. I don't know what else to say. Danish health officials said in a news briefing Wednesday that while the BA2 subtype seems more contagious, there are no indications that it has an impact on hospitalizations or deaths. So again, as you saw, that's a pretty thorough breakdown that they've got in that article. So I encourage you guys to go check it out if you got more questions around it. Now let's jump over to the Financial Post. And essentially, government workers made out well during the pandemic. And so just going to highlight a couple points here. So we have 338 MPs. You'd think just one of them would have been willing to take a stand against universal raises, but you'd be wrong. At the height of the pandemic, as the debt ballooned to 1 trillion mark and beyond, Ottawa agreed to the new contracts for thousands of its employees, and not a single MP objected. So while you and yours struggled through COVID-19, your representatives in Ottawa pocketed 2 pay increases. Backbench MPs are now receiving $6,900 more than they did pre-pandemic, and the Prime Minister's getting an extra $13,800. This is a number, though, that actually blew my mind. I didn't realize this. There are 312,700 more government jobs across Canada than there were just before the pandemic. About 4.2 million in December 2021 versus only 3.9 million in February 2020, according to Stats Canada, including an extra 114,500 in public administration, which essentially are bureaucrats. Over the same period, the number of jobs outside government fell by 80,100. So let that sink in. We live in a country of 38 million people, and essentially more than 10% of those people work for the government. And again, once you start adjusting for people that are of the age that aren't also retired, it becomes an even larger percentage of the Canadian population works for the government. I'm just going to say I don't like that. Straight up, don't like it. And in fact, I think that puts a lot of people in a weird position, right? If your sole source of income is purely from the government, it's going to put you in an awkward position where either you're going to want to drink all their Kool-Aid or you're going to feel compelled to not speak out. Particularly in this era where whistleblowers seem to get blamed more and more often. There's a lot more poignant examples in the United States, but I think that it's reasonable to think that also permeates Canadian culture here. And we've got an article on the old Governor General, which I'll cover in a couple stories. But I guess we'll let this be our last blue pill story of the day, but this is from the Toronto Star. Spread hatred, face courts, repeat why Canada's weak laws are failing to address the rise of hate. Now, first of all, understand that not every country has anti-hate legislation or anti-hate laws or essentially anti-speech laws. So again, those of you that grew up in the era of sticks and stones may break your bones, but words will never hurt me. We apparently don't live in that era anymore. I'll let you guys read into the examples in the Toronto Star article here. And again, if you can't get behind their paywall, because I think this was a special one, you can always go to 12ft.io, and that essentially lets you jump any paywall because you don't want to support these commies. But that's maybe a little too mean. But anyways, we'll keep rolling here, and let's get into some red pill stories for today. So this is from the Post Millennial. Watch Jack Posobiec slam CCP's zero COVID Olympics and U.S. for kowtowing to Xi Jinping. And so I think it is important at this point in time to understand, at least from my perspective, and I'd love to get your guys' perspective, anyone that's promoting a zero COVID strategy is completely deluded, or they're living in March 2020, as far as I'm concerned. As the article has a quote here, China is one of the few places in the world still adhering to a zero COVID strategy in which it aims to stamp out all cases within its borders, the report says. Posobiec went on to highlight the fact that people in China have been forced to quarantine in malls and offices, often for days on end, as the country attempts to achieve zero COVID. Further on, he then turned his attention back to the Olympics, ESPN not sending reporters over, NBC not sending reporters over, but we're sending our athletes because we're stupid and because we're kowtowing to the CCP. Yeah, it kind of feels that way, right? Like, either we live in this dangerous time when, vaccinated or unvaccinated Canadians aren't allowed to cross borders, and, it seems like people almost want us just to either, get the jab or else, and yet it's cool to send over Olympians to China. It doesn't make sense. I'm not a big fan of the Olympics in the first place, so I'm probably bringing a bit of that bias into it, but it just seems silly to me. But another red pill story that I personally feel like doesn't get nearly that much coverage in the mainstream media, 2,800 illegal border crossers entered through Roxham Road in December. If you guys don't even know what Roxham Road is and what's going on there, essentially, like, illegal immigrants from the United States literally take taxi cabs to the border in Quebec at this illegal crossing and cross over into Canada. The moment they cross over, they're essentially accepted as asylum seekers. You don't have to be vaccinated in order to cross over. If you're not vaccinated, you still have to go through the same procedures as anyone else that's not vaccinated. So refugee claimants are requested to show proof of vaccination if they have been vaccinated. Boudreau told True North, unvaccinated individuals will be permitted to enter if making an asylum claim, but will be required to follow all COVID-19 public health obligations, including all testing requirements. So again, I encourage you guys to find out and learn more about Roxham Road, but it is pretty wild. I think that over the last year or two, I think that over 60,000 people have entered into Canada. I can't remember if that was through Roxham Road or whether that was through all unauthorized ports of entry. I guess you'll have to do your own research there. And then wanted to highlight an article here from the Globe and Mail, and I'm sure you guys have seen it bouncing around on the internet, that Chrystia Freeland tops Justin Trudeau as preferred Liberal leader, poll finds. So remember, she's also a board member, as we covered on our special episode on the World Economic Forum. Well, it wasn't a super special episode, but where I went pretty deep into what's going on with the World Economic Forum and how they talk about penetrating over 50% of Canada's parliament, or Canada's cabinet, I should say, at Parliament. And Freeland, again, wrote an article called Plutocrats that, you should really just look into it. And it's fascinating to see how this all evolved. And as she's gone into politics, she's only been ingrained further and further into WEF. And as far as I'm concerned, Klaus Schwab, he doesn't represent me. He doesn't represent Canada. He represents a fringe minority of elites that essentially want to see you eat bugs, own nothing, and they'll tell you you're going to be happy about it. Maybe that should have been a black pill story. Then what I wanted to highlight here was from True North. So I didn't see this getting a lot of press coverage, although Jordan Peterson's doing his best to bring it to the forefront. So again, really appreciate Jordan Peterson and what he's doing. But this article from True North, he helped write the charter. Now he says the government is violating it. So former Newfoundland Premier Brian Peckford is the last surviving of the first ministers involved in the drafting and adoption of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in 1982. This week, Peckford announced he's suing the government over its vaccine mandates for air travel, arguing it violates Canadians' mobility rights, as well as the rights to life, liberty, and freedom from discrimination. And so I haven't had a lot of opportunity. I've been covering the trucker story a lot, so I haven't dug as deep into this as I'd like. But again, I encourage you guys to find out more. If you really want to find out a lot more, Jordan Peterson's got this this extended podcast episode where it's about an hour and a half where he's essentially speaking with him and getting his perspective on why he's suing the government and why he thinks that this is a violation of our Charter of Rights. Then one more red pill story, and then we'll get into some black pills. From Rebel News here, unvaccinated parents banned from seeing their own sick kids. So Western Australia Premier Mark McGowan to lock out parents from seeing their sick kids in hospitals unless they are vaccinated. And again, I don't understand why Canada and Australia need to try and out-tyrant each other at this point in time, but we absolutely, as I've said in the past, seem like we're in a death match to see who can be the most authoritarian and the most crazy in regards to COVID-19 and mandates. And again, I'll give it. I think the Aussies are beating us right now, but that's not a belt that you're going to want to wear with any sort of pride. So moving on to the black pill, let's talk about erasing history. So this is from Blacklock's reporter. So hundreds of plaques purged. So about a tenth of federal historical designations approved since 1919 will be purged or rewritten, including numerous tributes to John A. Macdonald. Records show revisionism follows a cabinet order to delete history deemed to celebrate colonialism. So I think the biggest issue here that I take is, one, the desire to erase history, right? Like, history has never been pristine or clean, and honestly, our future will never be pristine or clean either. There's always going to be bad actors. There's always going to be bad judgments. There's always going to be bad situations that occur. There's no perfect equilibrium we're ever going to find ourselves with. But I do find it concerning that there seems to be this narrative now to go almost overcorrect, it feels like, in regards to trying to showcase history. Again, I'd much rather see a more balanced approach here, but let's just quickly highlight a quote from Freeland. So what standards, this was a question asked of her, what standards should we use to decide when a historical figure's name should be removed? Asked a reporter. This is an excellent, important, and really complicated question, replied Freeland. Well, that was a non-answer if I ever heard one. And yet we're already going to get rid of 10% of the plaques that have been approved since 1919 in the historical designations. So without even having a succinct answer to that, we're already just like going to get rid of 10%. And I don't know, I feel like there's this book, 1984, that kind of talks about the dangers of just choosing to delete parts of history that you find inconvenient or awkward or bad. And I feel like there was a dude, Joseph Stalin, if I remember correctly, that literally would just crop people out of photos as they were sent off to the gulags. Again, I'm not saying that we couldn't do updates or revisions to some of these plaques, but to want to essentially rewrite all of them or get rid of them, right? Rather than amend or have additions or counterpoints or counter perspectives. I think that that's what I really find concerning. But again, I encourage you guys to go read the entire article. Then moving on, this is from True North. Media ignored crucial details when reporting RCMP raid of pipeline protests. So the reason I'm bringing this up isn't because I want to make pipeline protesters out to be some evil, abhorrent group or to try and paint them as, crazy extremists. The reason I want to point this out is literally this article discusses how the CBC misrepresented what occurred at this one protest and essentially said the police overreacted and were essentially aggressive and violent towards the protesters there, and cherry-picked the information they shared with the public based upon their one CBC reporter, Lopez, who's kind of got a history of really massaging certain narratives. And so again, I don't want to paint out that these pipeline protesters were evil or anything, but I just want to highlight that it turns out they said mean things to the police as well, and they made derogatory terms. The same way that you'll probably see some protesters this weekend at the trucker Convoy for Freedom probably do similar. It turns out you get, as Pierre Poilievre said yesterday, you get a large group of humans together. Once they get into even the dozens, but into the hundreds or thousands, and you're just going to have some bad actors. You're going to have some agitators. You might even have some Fed posters or some glow boys, as far as we know. But in addition to that, you're also just going to actually have, like, in any large group of humans, there's going to be someone crazy, right? And again, I don't want to. I think everyone should have the right to protest. I don't know a ton about this situation other than what the article covered, but I do sort of remember when it initially popped off, I think in 2019. But it's important to understand that we shouldn't just immediately jump to conclusions and want to demonize the other side or demonize protesters or people that disagree with the government. And whenever faced with a question between the government and a Canadian or a protester, I personally want to give the benefit of the doubt to the Canadian or the protester, whether they're protesting vaccine mandates, in which case I'm probably going to give them all the benefit of the doubt, or if they're protesting pipelines, if they're protesting environmental issues, if they're protesting Indigenous rights or Indigenous grave sites. Again, I'm going to have a bias towards the individual, the small group, right, versus the government and the corporate press, because at this point in time, there is no check and balance. The corporate press is just the propaganda wing of the government, and they just regurgitate. They very rarely do investigative reporting. They very rarely are willing to question or challenge the narrative. And the last 2 years is a perfect example of that, right? Remember the crazy conspiracy theory of the Wuhan lab leak that now essentially is just accepted? And we've also decided, I guess, there's going to be no consequences to China or Eco Alliance or the National Institute of Health in the US. Yeah. Again, I think that we should give the benefit of the doubt to the individual until we get more information in general. And so Jordan Peterson yesterday and today has been tweeting out things like, don't take the bait to truckers and protesters. Like, don't jump to the challenge that either counter protesters or government or police may make of you. I think hold your head high and stand firm on your beliefs and your right to protest. But at the same time, I don't think that anyone outside the corporate press and a handful of politicians want to see things deteriorate into violence or chaos or anarchy. And that's even coming from like an accelerationist. That's this guy. But moving on, this one feels like a really big black pill. This is from Tim Cash. IRS to require taxpayers to scan their face to access accounts. I can guarantee you this is coming to Canada eventually. The IRS has entered an $86 million contract with ID.me to provide the software and management of the new tool. So the IRS started accepting returns for 2021 earnings on Monday, but changes are coming. Taxpayers can file their returns the old-fashioned way, but the IRS encourages online submissions for most users. By summer, anyone wanting to access their information on the IRS website will need to record a video of their face with a computer or smartphone and send it to the private contractor ID.me to confirm their identity. And what's kind of funny to me here, beyond the fact that, this is the technocracy just doubling down on data gathering and biometrics and things of that nature. But in addition to this is the fact that, voting IDs are racist in the United States, if I understand my mainstream media narratives right. But no one's upset about the fact that you're going to literally have to record a video of yourself on a smart device and send it to the IRS in order to access your account. Yeah, I'm sure that we'll see no issues come out of that whatsoever. And then another black pill here for you guys. And this maybe could have been a clown pill, but I really hate this Governor General. Exclusive, Governor General's office paid $277,000 in secret settlements the year Julie Payette resigned. The public account lists $277,592 as going to 5 claimants whose names are withheld due to publication exemption. So remember how essentially with almost no vetting, we essentially put a bully who made for a toxic work environment, according to almost anyone in her department. Essentially, it turns out that Julie actually had a history of doing this. You could go back and see other places where she had to exit stage left in unceremoniously. And then literally we decided to promote her to one of the highest offices in the government. And she did the exact same thing. And I forget whether she was in for a couple years or was it only 1 year? I should have double checked that before doing the story. But what I really want to highlight that really black pills me, and I covered this like a year ago back when I used to do news stories on my main Canadian real estate channel. Despite resigning from the post, Payette qualifies for a lifetime pension of nearly $150,000 per year and is allowed to claim expenses related to any work she might do as a former Governor General. So not only did she cost us $300,000 essentially in legal fees and payouts because of what a toxic work environment she created, but somehow she's able to keep her pension and she worked for a handful of years. Yeah, that's enough to blackpill me on the administration and bureaucracy for sure. And then finally, moving on to a clown pill story. Good news, Ontario. It turns out you must have been extra good girls and boys, because Ontario cinemas will be allowed to serve food government sources. Wow. I'm just overwhelmed with the personal freedoms as long as I've got a vaccine passport and they're at 50% capacity. And literally the COVID police could walk in at any moment in time to check our papers. But at least I can eat some popcorn. That's a clown story. All right. And then moving on to a couple white pills here. The first one I want to highlight, if you guys haven't seen this, there's actually a couple different YouTube channels now that are aggregating different feeds coming from Ottawa as well as those headed towards Ottawa, essentially highlighting what's going on here in the trucker freedom protest. There's a link in the video description down below to one of the feeds, but I encourage you guys, do a little bit of internet sleuthing, because sometimes these feeds are shut down. Some of them are more or less accurate than others, but I really do think it's great. Too bad right now, it looks like none of these actually have, before they actually had some copter or some helicopter views that showed very large groups. I would argue groups that appear to be at least like 300, 400, 500 people each, which again, I would think add up into the thousands. But again, just wanted to encourage you guys to go check that out. And then I wanted to highlight this post. I saw it making the rounds on social media. I don't personally know or haven't followed Rob Grimaldi, but I thought this was a great sentiment, and I want to share it with you guys as we go into this weekend. While it is nice to see Canadians finally coming together again, I'd like to take a second to say thank you to those of you who used your voice before it was the popular opinion and the cool thing to do. Before it was easy, when it was costing you friendships, loved ones, social status, jobs, and businesses. In my opinion, you are the true leaders of Canada, and I thank you for fighting for our freedom, not just today, but also when it was most needed. Let this be a lesson to always trust your intuition, for you knew since the beginning that what was happening was not right. And let yourself always remember how courageous you were during the most important time in our history, for you chose to speak up and do what was right, even when it was difficult. There are a lot of people in your circle who owe you an apology and should be thanking you, but that won't happen. So I'm doing it on their behalf. Thank you. And I just want to share a similar sentiment to every one of you that have throughout this, whether it started yesterday, whether it started the first day of lockdowns. Thank you to those of you that spoke out, that fought for freedom, that believe that you actually should have the right of free movement. You should have the right of free association. You should have the right to make your own medical decisions. And honestly, while I'm proud of when I woke up, I'm also ashamed of it took me so long to wake up. And I know it's a different journey for each and every one of us. But one of the main reasons I wanted to put together the Maple Pill Show was just to make sure you guys realized you're not alone. I know for a lot of people, when they found themselves at the Thanksgiving dinner table, when they found themselves at Christmas parties, found themselves isolated, sometimes just ostracized and not even invited or allowed in because of their vaccination status or because of their political views. And I really do think that that's a shame. And most people won't be able to say, I'm sorry or thank you for the things you did, but I really do appreciate you guys. And just know that I think that there's a much larger silent group out there than a fringe minority that really respects you and appreciates everything you've done up until this point in time, and presumably everything you're going to do in the future as well. And then finally, let's move on to, I feel like I said finally a lot today. I'm going to have to cut that word out of my vocabulary, but wanted to share this meme with you guys. I always like to leave off with a meme. So this was from Elon Musk. And reminder, we talked about some of his tweets yesterday, but essentially, this is a Lord of the Rings meme. COVID emergency powers, showing the One Ring, government, and why shouldn't I keep it? And alas, I think that most of our government, most of our administrators, most of our health officials find themselves in this place where, for the life of them, they just can't give up those powers they already got. And, why would they? It probably felt great. They probably saw their budgets blossom, right? They probably saw the number of the headcounts in their departments grow, as we shared earlier today. And understand, without checks and balances, the bureaucracy will always bloat and consume as much as possible. the political class, the corporate press, they are the parasite class, and they will consume the host. That's us, the average Canadians. That's all the Canadian citizens, to the extent we allow them to. And that's why things like this freedom protest are so important. That's why I believe things like this freedom protest are much more than just about trucker vaccine mandates. It's a proxy for everything that's been going on, all the craziness over the last 2 years, when the government told you can't trust your eyes, you can't trust your personal experiences, that you just need to trust the science trademarked, rather than actually, do your own research, think critically for yourself, and make your own decisions. So again, I just want to say I appreciate those of you guys that have been watching these videos, those of you smashing the like button, those of you sharing on social media. I know that the technology algorithms are going to do us no favors in regards to this show, but it honestly doesn't matter. If I'm helping create common knowledge, or even just giving confidence to a handful of individuals, that's worth it in my opinion. And that's important to have occur in this time and this particular moment in time. And then last thing I want to leave you guys with is don't let off the gas, regardless of what happens this weekend. If the protest goes swimmingly well and magically somehow, which I don't expect to have happen, Trudeau comes out of his stupor and realizes I'm going to undo everything, and every premier follows suit, we need to be ever vigilant, because that's always the price of freedom and personal liberties. And if it turns out that this was a giant Fed post or some other craziness happens this weekend, again, that doesn't diminish your right to your individual freedoms. Really appreciate you guys. And it's important to remember there's only two types of people in this world: those that understand history and those that trust the government and the corporate press. And I know which side I want to be on, and I suspect I know which side you guys are on as well. So we'll quickly hit some of the chats here, because I do appreciate you guys that engage with these posts as well, or these videos, I should say. So we've got Abdul. Hey, what's up, Abdul? Peter, as always, appreciate it. JJ Clem, woot woot. The first time I actually got a live notification before the video was actually over. That's good to hear, JJ, and I'm glad to hear you've got notifications turned on. And for anyone else that struggles to find these, you're not crazy. It's probably just the algorithm not loving the show. So you can hit that little notification bell on YouTube, and you can say, notify me of all videos. But in addition, if I ever disappear here, guys, if you come someday and the channel's just disappeared, it's been thrown down the memory hole, like some of those plaques we were talking about earlier. Reminder, I am on Rumble. I upload all these videos after the fact on Rumble. There's a link now in the video description down below on this video to the Rumble channel. That's a great way just to make sure, because at least at this stage, I don't believe Rumble is going to censor me. We'll see what happens in a few years from now as they continue to grow as a platform, but at least today, they seem pretty legit. Oh, and by the way, I made 2 cents over the last 3 weeks of uploading on Rumble, so there we go. What's up, Alan Grace? Appreciate it. Elizabeth, appreciate that. And P-Champ, seeing a lot of people pushing the right-wing racist narrative to try and diminish this amazing movement. 100% agree. It's very frustrating, and it's so disingenuous, right? The same way that if you were, as we said, to attack everyone that were pipeline protesters or things of that nature. Lindsay saying, I'm here in Ottawa. That's awesome, Lindsay. Keep us posted on what's going on. And for anyone that is in Ottawa, if you guys get some cool footage or an interesting moment, or you just got an anecdotal story, feel free to slide into my DMs or my DMs on Instagram. Again, link in the video description down below to my Instagram account. Feel free to join the Problems or Profits Discord. There's a link in the video description where essentially you can find a thread on the Maple Pill. I would love it if you guys would upload any of the footage you get that you're willing to let me share. That would be fantastic, because again, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the mainstream media is going to start covering it tomorrow because it's going to be too big for them to ignore. But I suspect that there will still be games afoot and shenanigans and such. Prairie says freedom. All caps. Love it. Abdul, thanks, Elizabeth. That's what I see too. Oh, so Abdul was first in the chat. I agree. That's what I see here. What do you think of the Capitol's memorandum if their offices are breached, and the procedure on what to destroy and how to do it? What do you think of the Capitol's memorandum? I'm not sure what that is actually in reference to. So are you talking about the U.S. or Canada? Because I don't believe that anything's going to get breached tomorrow, and I don't think anything should be breached tomorrow. Benjamin says, we are going out to the legislative building here in Regina. I'm really looking forward to meet with like-minded individuals. I'll share some footage on the Discord. Awesome. Appreciate it. And yeah, if you guys, for whatever reason, weren't able to go to Ottawa and support what's going on, again, look for some local protests in your own backyard, right? There appears to be several movements that are focused on going to the provincial legislatures in different provinces. And I encourage you guys to participate if you're so inclined. Because again, I think we've talked throughout, one of the white pill focuses, and one of the reasons I created the Problems for Profit Citadel is because you need to start building a real life network, right? As we commented earlier in today's story with the shortage economy, it seems like this might be here to stay a little bit more than they originally led on. The same way that inflation's here to stay a lot more. Remember when inflation was transitory like 6 months ago, and yet anyone with more than 2 brain cells to rub together knew that that was bullshit? Well, now that they're starting to frame it as the shortage economy rather than like, oh, it's just a short-term supply chain issue, I think it's going to be more important than ever that you've got friends and family in your local vicinity, that you build deep social bonds. I personally think that's one of the things the state hates the most, is when you build deep social bonds, whether that's around a religious community, whether that's around just a social community, whether that's around a political identity. They don't want you to have deep social bonds. They want you to be isolated by identity politics and a race towards victimhood. Don't let them win. And I think one of the great ways, as Benjamin said there, is to go and actually just meet people that are like-minded and kindred spirits. And I think now is one of the best opportunities you're going to find, at least in recent memory, to do so. What do we got? We got Yazzie Bro, been scrolling live chats from the Freedom Convoy feeds. The world is watching. I'm not sure what WWG1WGA means, but I'm familiar with crypto Twitter where, what is it? We're all going to make it. So WAGMI. Hungarian Experiment says, oh, weird. On my end, I was first. JJ says, okay, so we just got a few debates going on about who was first in the chat. I'm glad that that's even a thing. Congrats, bro. First step to big time. You're attracting troll vermin. Left-hard cheers taste like Chivas. Cheers. I must have accidentally skipped over, or maybe they got moderated naturally, but go truckers, 100% agree. Annual COVID shot since the flu is so 2019. Yeah, honestly, at this point in time, I wouldn't be surprised if they want more than just be annual, right? As we've covered in previous stories, we literally have what we committed for like essentially 3 more years of boosters, which worked out to, if I remember, it was either like 8 or 10 shots per Canadian. Some wild numbers being thrown around. JJ says they aren't COVID shots. Okay. They're boosters to try to make you feel comfortable with it, as we all get booster shots when we are kids. Sorry. The reason I trailed off there is there are sometimes people share some more extreme opinions that would get me kicked off YouTube if I read them on the live stream. So if you guys ever hear me trail off, that's just me making sure I'm not about to get myself ban-hammered. Elizabeth says, I'm grateful for the entire Problems or Profits team for waking the fuck up to all the things. Appreciate that, Elizabeth. And again, I'm really proud that I was able to help inspire anyone that has been inspired by me. And I appreciate everyone that inspired me to stand up as well, because it's very rare that we're going to truly do it alone, right? Humans are social creatures, right? We're naturally kind of herd oriented, right? We want to be in groups. We want to belong. And if you believe you're completely alone or by yourself in your views, it's so easy to find yourself completely black-pilled, become very nihilistic. And that doesn't serve you well. And it doesn't serve those around you well. And it's literally what I think the regime wants you to, that's the position the regime wants you to be in. Don't forget about Terry Fox. Not sure. If you're talking about like Terry Fox and his plaques, are they literally trying to cancel him? Because that would blow my mind. And again, maybe I don't know enough about him, but I can't understand what would be cancelable about Terry Fox. Graham says the federal government sent a memo to staffers who work in Ottawa detailing what to do if the building is breached. That's what the previous commenter was asking about. Oh, interesting. I didn't see that memo. It hopefully won't be relevant by Monday, but if it is relevant, I'll make sure I get myself informed and I'll try and share my perspective with you guys. But again, really appreciate those of you watching this video. Really appreciate those of you showing support. And again, show support for the Freedom Convoy if you're so inclined. And I encourage you to do more research if you're not inclined to want to support them. And we'll see you on Monday with another live video at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Maybe if things really go interesting, I'll do a couple live videos on the weekend, but otherwise Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you can always watch me on Rumble as well. Appreciate you guys, and we'll see you in the next video.